On this episode of RetroQuest, we're going to look at some very interesting handheld devices, some licensed games, and some of the most classic RPGs of all time. Join me on a quest for all things retro. The first thing I want to talk about is the PocketGo from BitBoy. Now, there have been a lot of reviews and videos about the PocketGo, and I wanted to check it out myself. It retails usually for about $50, but I've seen it as low as $36. A few things about it. First of all, it has a nice 2.4-inch screen, and it's tempered glass, which means if you throw it on the ground, it's still going to break. The buttons are actually pretty good. They're all convex. They kind of round up instead of caving in down. The D-pad feels nice. It has a place for a micro SD card right on the top so you can put more ROMs on it if you wanted to. A charging port, AV out, earphone jack, and a reset button that'll take you back to the menu screen so you can change games. Overall, it feels pretty good in my hands, and I'm pretty impressed with the screen and the look of it for the most part. It has a nice viewing angle. Even at this angle, I can clearly see Bald Bull getting his butt kicked by Little Mac. Now, as for the games themselves, it is kind of a mixed bag. I had great success with Punch-Out! One time when I loaded Zelda, it was really slow, but the next time I loaded it, it ran perfectly smooth. And ever since then, every time I've tried Zelda, it was perfectly smooth. Maybe the batteries were dying, I don't know. The biggest issue I've seen was with Super Metroid, when there were transparency effects. The rain at the beginning when Samus's ship lands, the rain wasn't transparent. Now, you could go into the settings by hitting reset, and you could toggle some things to make it visible, make the rain actually transparent, but then the game ran slow with a slower frame rate. But other games that I tried seemed to run perfectly. Rocket Knight Adventures was silky smooth and beautiful. So overall, the big question really is it worth $36 or $50 or however much you can find it for? And I would say it really depends on you. If you're expecting perfect emulation, it probably isn't going to be worth it. There will be some bugs. And even though some of those bugs may be fixed with patches down the line, still, out the box, is it something that runs perfectly? Not perfectly. But if you just want to have access to these games and to have such a small device that literally fits in your pocket, and because of save states, which are not available on things like Game Boy Advance, there is a certain number of features that make this worth having. So in my opinion, I'm glad I got it, and if you're curious about it, I do recommend you check it out and watch other videos about it. I was cruising eBay one time looking at Game Boy Advance stuff when I came upon this. Now this is a completely modded, everything I ever wanted in a Game Boy Advance, all boiled down to one thing. It's completely customized. It's got a clear shell, black D-pad, black highlights, gray buttons, and red A and B buttons. Clearly I was going for the NES look. But the other thing that made this really cool is it has the brighter screen. So it's basically the best of every possible combination that I personally would want. Now what's great about the seller here, his name is God of Gaming, and when you go to his page, God of Gaming Shop, you can pick the shell color, you can pick the button color and the D-pad color. It's all completely customizable, but it will always have that brighter screen and always have this form factor of the original Game Boy Advance. It's indistinguishable from the original. I don't feel any difference at all. I have the original Atomic Purple one. It feels exactly the same. I'm very, very impressed with it. So the first things I want to talk about are the Star Wars Trilogy. Now, all three of these games are very similar, very steep difficulty. I personally have never beat any of them, but I appreciate that they have varying gameplay. There's land speeder levels, X-Wing levels, weird vehicle levels, like in Return of the Jedi. I don't even know what that vehicle is. There's multiple playable characters. You can play as Han and Chewie and Leia and, of course, Luke Skywalker. You can ride a Tauntaun. There's a lot of variety in these games. To think now that those movies have been out for 40 years, and this game came out only 15 years after. Wow. We're getting old.
Side quest complete.
I also picked up Spiderman XMen Arcade's Revenge. Ooh. Now this game means something to me. I should never have sold the one I had originally because it was given to me as a gift from my brother. I still remember that Christmas, I wanted so bad to get Mickey's Magical Quest. And when I saw under the tree, there was a box wrapped, shaped just like a Super Nintendo game, and I thought it was going to be Magical Quest. But it wasn't. it was Spider-Man, XMen, Arcade's Revenge. And I was at first disappointed, and I showed it, and I feel like a jerk. Even to this day, it's one of those things that haunts me. Well, it's Spider-Man, and it's the X-Men, so it's gonna be great, right? Well, it's a licensed game.
There's a licensed game in the plane, Shock! Oh, that's just some nice shelf candy. I hate licensed games, Shock. I hate them.
The Spider-Man level at first isn't terrible, but I mean, you're just walking around, I guess, like turning off detonators or something. He does have his Spider-Man abilities. He can swing, he can climb walls, he has a spider sense, so I guess there's Spider-Man-y stuff. But then you get to the second part after that first opening level, and you're playing as all the varying X-Men. You can choose who you want to play as: Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, or Storm. None of their levels are particularly great. It's just not very fun to me. I don't know what it is. Storm is kind of swimming, and she's blowing up these valves and causing the water level to rise. It reminds me of the water level in Ninja Turtles because you get electrocuted and stuff. But her swimming animation is really weird. She's just kind of laying there flat, and her life is her air. So, she can get electrocuted all she wants, but as long as she can go find a seashell and breathe, then she'll be fine, right? Well, look. It's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not really something that I think I want to go back and play again and again. Wolverine Adamantium Rage. Now, when you play this game, you're going to have some Adamantium Rage because he's so freaking hard to control. It does give nods to Wolverine, of course. The comic book presentation style of the story, his healing factor is included. It looks good if you look at screenshots, but when you actually play it, it just feels really wrong.
I hate licensed games, Shock!
He's just, like I said, he's too big. He jumps forward and does these rolls, or you're trying to jump onto a platform and he over jumps it. It's just hard to see what's going on and very hard to control. I don't think you're going to like it too much if you didn't grow up playing it. And even at the time, I remember reading it I think it got like a 6.2 out of 10. At the time it was released, it wasn't even respected that well. I also picked up The Adventures of Yogi Bear. Now, when I was a kid, I loved Yogi Bear. I remember that Christmas special with Snively, and he would always say, "Boo Boo, my boy." Oh, Boo Boo would say, "The ranger isn't going to like that, Yogi." So they made a game for him, but unfortunately, by the time we were the age to play this, we weren't kids anymore. But they made it very much a kid's game. It's very simplistic. Now, it's also got an environmental message where Jellystone Park is getting polluted, or it's in danger of becoming a chemical dumping zone, and so Yogi has to stop that from happening. So it's simplistic, a little bit maybe too easy, but I mean, it looks actually really good graphically, but as far as the game itself, it's nothing really to write home about.
I hate them!
Now, speaking of home though, I actually did grow up where toxic waste was being dumped, and it seeped into the water. And I grew up drinking that water, which is probably why I'm so screwed up. But we sued whoever it was, we sued them. I was a little kid when we did this, but we sued them, and I got money, which I used to buy a lot of Nintendo 64 games once it finally settled in my early 20s. So that's a useless story. The last licensed game I picked up was also one of the coolest looking, Robocop vs. Terminator. The game itself is pretty average, but obviously the selling point is this awesome packaging. There's nothing else like this. It's black, embossed, engraved, shaped, molded packaging. It just looks really cool. I mean, there's nothing else like it on the system, so it's really cool to get it if you're a collector. But I think that it's really interesting how they took the Robocop franchise and the Terminator franchise and managed to meld them together. Basically, the idea is that Robocop technology was used by Skynet as part of the foundation, including, other things, in order to make Terminator technology. Now, again, is the game that great? No, it's very, very average. But I think for this package alone, it's worth tracking down a complete copy, and picking it up. Now, the next 3 games I want to talk about are games that I really, really like. But there was a time when I had to make some money and I sold them. Let's face it, if you need to make some money, a lot of times you're going to have to sell the heavy hitters of your collection. And the 3 games that I picked up, I bought them in a bundle from one person. I got a really good deal. All of them are expensive games, but my deal I feel was very, very good. So one of those games is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. And when I popped this in after just playing all those licensed games that were terrible, it was a breath of fresh air. I mean, the graphics were good, the sound, it just sounded so good. And it reminded me instantly of why this was a classic. It was a partnership between Square and Nintendo to make an RPG with Mario characters, which was just unheard of. They also added some cool elements besides the weird humor, the fact that you teamed up with Bowser and other unique characters like Mallow, but I think one of the coolest things for me was the timed strike mechanic. Because RPGs often they felt kind of stale to me, like you pick something on a menu and you wait for it to happen. But the fact that you could add that extra layer of timing your jump or timing when you're about to be hit and potentially doing a critical amount of damage or potentially avoiding damage, I thought that added a very cool element, and I absolutely love this game. One of the other games I bought in that deal is Chrono Trigger. Now, it's hard for me to even believe, thinking about it, that I actually got rid of it. But I'm glad that I'm finally in a position again to buy it again, and so I picked it up. This time, no box, no manual, but I do have it again. And man, as soon as I saw that pendulum swinging on the title screen, it brought me back. I remembered why I loved this game so much, and started, just as I played it, got to the fair, I saw like Luca doing her time travel demonstration and it malfunctioning, and just everything about it, it brought me back to why I loved it so much. Thinking about the playing with the frog and the robot and the prehistoric girl and just building your team and the way they united all this stuff together into one story. This is a game that I can absolutely say belongs in a game room.
That belongs in a game room.
Yeah, you can get it on all kinds of virtual console setups. You can get it on DS. You can get it, God knows, many ways on, in emulation. But to have the actual game, to have it again, this one's a classic.
You have chosen wisely.
The last game I got in the deal was what many consider a grail game, but to me, it's just the weirdest game I've ever played, and that is Earthbound. Now, there's something really cool about an alien invasion happening in the modern world. I mean, there's no other RPGs that have a story like that. It's not in a fantasy world. So the fact that you're using ATM machines, hamburgers, and frying pans, and baseball bats, and all this sort of modern stuff, that alone makes it weird. But when you're fighting enemies like Manly Fish's brother, or abstract art, that just takes it over the top. There's so much going on in this. It's an amazing, interesting, unique game, and it's worth anyone having and putting in their game room. It stands alone. So I got a message from Tommy J. Mysterious last name. Actually, you told me your last name, but I'll keep it private because I respect your privacy. Tommy J. and his family watch the show. And his kids enjoy the show too, and they wanted to send me something, and that is just the coolest thing ever. NESComplex. I hope you enjoy the games and the Mario Mega Man perler beads we made for you. Thank you for being an awesome YouTuber. Kaylin and Kellen. That is the coolest thing. Kaylin and Kellen, you are awesome. Mega Man has to go join these Mega Man bosses so he can beat them up. And the other one is Mario from Super Mario Bros. 3. Also one of my favorite games. One of everyone's favorite games. Hopefully you don't fall, Mario. Kaylin and Kellen and Tommy and your family, thank you so much for doing that. That's so awesome. But that wasn't it. So besides the perler beads in the package, there were also 2 games. The first one was Tecmo Bowl. Now, Tecmo Bowl is surprisingly deep for an NES game, being able to choose from 4 plays and trying to guess which play your opponent is choosing in order to counter what they're trying to do. The game did not get the team licenses, so instead of the Raiders, you had Los Angeles. Instead of the 49ers, you had San Francisco. But it did have 12 different cities represented. Now, it did get the players' licenses, so you do have players like, of course, Bo Jackson. When I played this as a kid, I always remember we'd try to get the kicker to be at full power, and whenever we got to full power, we'd shout, "Full power!" Just like that. Another interesting fact about this is that it's been on a lot of top 100 lists. Nintendo Power, GameSpot, and even Time Magazine rated this as one of the better games ever in the history of gaming. They also included Double Dragon 1. Now, I used to have the Trilogy, but I got rid of it, so I'm getting it back. It's cool to have Double Dragon 1 again in my collection. I always thought their heads looked really abnormally large, and I thought Abobo was weird. He's a freak. I mean, he's just like a chewed up bald bull. It's just big and chewed up. But anyway, after getting Double Dragon 1, I was on the lookout for 2 and 3. So when I went to South Carolina recently, I found Double Dragon 2 and 3.
Side quest complete.
Double Dragon 2 does have some level variety changes. It is improved. I feel like it runs smoother and cleaner, and the level design is better. The moves are a bit frustrating at first, kicking behind you and punching forward. That I'm not a big fan of that change, but fortunately in Double Dragon 3 they fixed that. It's no longer there. They added a lot of cool moves where like you can flip over someone and grab their hair and toss them in like a somersault throw, or you can jump and do a spin kick. There's a lot more variety in that way, but also there's a lot of variety because as you beat characters you can add them. Like there's a Chinese martial artist and a ninja that you can add as playable characters, which is a really cool development. Now this game in particular was also unique to me because I had it as a kid. I traded somebody, and when I got it as a kid, there was like, I thought, label damage right here. Later when I grew up, I realized the label wasn't damaged, but a sticker had been ripped off. And when I think about who I had traded it with, I realized he probably stole it from Blockbuster or something. But this isn't that copy, but it is cool to have this back in the collection. Lately I've been picking up a lot of what my friend NES Addict would call Nintendo oddities. These are the objects, not games, but the other things Nintendo put out in the 80s and 90s that kids had. I'm sure you saw a lot of these, maybe had some of these, but these are things I had never really seen. So I'm looking forward to showing you all these weird items that I picked up on the next episode. See you then.